Hello, Steve White, Trek Boy 89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, we've had some good news about Star Trek. As bad as Section 31 was, it apparently is so bad it is helping Star Trek. It may actually save Star Trek because it appears to have pushed Skydance to decide to not negotiate a new contract with Alex Kurtzman and to basically cancel that contract and get out of working with him and take Star Trek back in-house and to get full creative control of one of their most important franchises. This is the best thing that can happen to Star Trek. Now, the rumour is, and unfortunately it's all rumour at this point, and we may never know all the internal things officially, but apparently what happened was 48 hours after Section 31 was released, the same people who allegedly did a report of the franchise as a whole, as well as Paramount as a whole, they went through and looked at all the franchises and basically gave suggestions of what to do and how to move forward and so forth. Apparently, the same people came in and they looked at everything and said, this is really bad. This is just appalling. We've got a divided fan base that hates Star Trek and hates everything about it, and this film doesn't represent Star Trek at all, and it's just unanimous that everyone hates it. It's not Star Trek, and this approach is wrong, this direction is wrong, and of course, blaming Kurtzman for it. Even if he wasn't responsible, they'd have to scapegoat someone, blame them, and then sell someone else as the savior and bring them in and do it all again. Maybe properly, but that's the talk of what's happened, and that is very good news, because before that they were sort of on the fence. It's like, well, do we keep them? Do we keep the contracts? Do we extend them? Do we bring in someone new? Because that would be starting over again, and there'd be like a period there where obviously they wouldn't be producing any Star Trek. They'd have to be sort of reevaluating, bringing new people in, starting over again. But long term, what would benefit Star Trek? Keeping on with this problematic sort of era in production that's not going well just because it's already in motion, or start again because they're coming in new. They don't have any ties to anything. It's not like it's an opportunity, and it looks like they're going to take it. And this is the best news. Now this is only coming from Sidetrack and some smaller places who seem to be talking to people who are talking to people who were sort of there in the executive sort of rooms. And basically, these reports came in and people got very emotional, and it's very strong, heated language and so forth, that this is, we are buying this company. We are buying Paramount, and one of the biggest assets is Star Trek, and these people are just effing it. And we need to get rid of them, start over. We can't do worse. And that's really good for Star Trek, and I hope that's what's happening, and I hope that's not just Sidetrack making up what I want to hear, because I'm going to keep viewing and keep watching and commenting, and that's good for his channel, because that's what Doomcock and the Fandom Menace people do for the haters. They just do the same. There's a new Kathleen Kennedy's leaving rumor, which has been, they've recycled that about 10 times because that's what people want to hear. Just like they recycled the Star Trek Discovery's being cancelled every year until it actually was. Because that's what people wanted to hear. They just regurgitate hate because they know that's what people want to hear, and their fan base wants to hear, and that's how they make their money. And if they don't have something to hate, they don't have anything to talk about. And that's why I'm very curious what will happen with something like a reboot of Buffy if it's good, because it was always woke. So they can't claim, oh, it's woke now, because it always was. Like, how are they going to manage stuff like that going forward? If things get better, how do they keep going? If they actually turn over the franchises to new people who actually, are not trying to subvert expectations and take it in a different direction and make it mainstream and so forth, what will happen? And how will Star Trek go? Can Star Trek survive? Because what was disturbing about all this was a second video that I watched of his where he was talking to Robert Kaczynski, who I hate, by the way, but I'm going to do a separate video about him. He was saying Kurtzman said to him that Star Trek was dying and they needed Section 31 because his whole, and he had the total wrong attitude. He was going into Star Trek going, Star Trek is bad and stupid and wrong. People don't like it, and it's dying. All the old fans are dying off, and new fans don't like Star Trek, so we need to make a different show and make Star Trek totally different to get a different audience, the general, sci-fi audience. And we need to make Star Trek generic so it'll appeal to them, and just try all different kinds and eventually we'll just get everyone for all these different type of generic science fiction shows that are specifically not Star Trek, because we think people don't like Star Trek, so we want to make science fiction shows with the Star Trek brand on it for everyone else. That was his philosophy. That has failed. That is the wrong philosophy. You can't go into producing something that you don't like, that you think is a failure and dying, and make it in spite of itself to be replaced by something else that you've created that's different, that is generic. That's what he's been doing the whole time. And if what Robert Kaczynski said is true, has been his approach. So he's right that Star Trek is dying, and he's been killing it by believing that. It's like, the self-fulfilling prophecy that he's basically created within Star Trek by hating it from the first place, and trying to change it from the get-go. So we'll see what happens. That's the rumor, that they have gotten a big enough scare with Section 31 that they're actually going to go in a new direction. And the reason why this happened in the first place was that KurtzMan had the wrong philosophy for the show. He had the wrong idea. That his idea was that Star Trek didn't work, wasn't good, wasn't bringing in new fans, wouldn't bring in new fans, so they had to totally change it, make it generic sci-fi to bring in the general audience and the generic sci-fi audience, which to a small extent it has. There's a new group of new Trek fans who don't like Star Trek but like generic science fiction, and just like Star Trek branded generic science fiction, and they will then attack the Star Trek fans who hate them, and you've got a divided fan base of new people who don't really get Star Trek but sort of watch the new shows, but then don't get into the old shows and don't support it like the originals. The originals were fanatic. They loved it because it was unique. What was unique about Star Trek was it was a positive, optimistic, utopian view of the future that gave us hope, that had aspirational characters and was light, and it was different from all other sci-fi, and it was a bit philosophical and a bit talky and a little bit but we loved it because that was something, we wanted to live in that world, and that's why those fans were so fanatic and spent so much money and time trying to live in that universe and be in that universe and keep that universe alive. Whereas new Trek fans, they don't care. They just watch other science fiction shows and they don't really care about it, so they don't have the same sort of ownership of it, and that's why the merchandise isn't doing as well. And it's just, you've got now this divided fan base of these two totally different people who have been brought in by totally different brands, and now what do? The hope is if you make a good Star Trek show, the generic sci-fi people will like it, but a lot of them will probably reject it because it's not dark and dystopian, because that's what generic sci-fi fans like. And the generic sci-fi fans that didn't like original Star Trek have been brought in to new Trek, so that's a problem. But if they can frankly lose them and re-engage the old fans, bring in new fans who maybe like generic science fiction but they like new Star Trek as well. They like something different, and you can like both. So there is hope. Basically, this is just a rumor at this point, but there is hope, and it doesn't make sense because there's no way a new company coming and buying an old company with a property like Star Trek could not look at how it's being received and see the overwhelming negative response to Section 31 and think, this is great, this is working, let's just keep going in that direction with the exact same people who did all that. Now, is it just a really good story because it all makes sense and it's believable, or is it what's actually happening? Sorry, my mouth is really dry, so I'm not speaking very well. So I'm really hopeful. This was supposed to be a 5-minute video, but there's a little bit more to talk about, and I'm excited about this because I have lived with this horror for 8 years of the new Trek era, and seeing Star Trek, something I loved because it was different and bright and colourful and utopian and wonderful. It gave me hope for the future and aspirational characters that weren't quite relatable, but that's why they were like superheroes. They were special, and I didn't want to be talked down in my own contemporary language, and I didn't want that, which other shows were doing. So Star Trek really meant a lot to me and really inspired me and really helped me to survive the world that I was in with hope for things being better. And especially now when things are getting worse, we need an example like Star Trek to say, no, it's going to be better in the future. You're not going to have the same problems that we have today in the future, like the original did in the 60s when they're all scared of the bomb dropping. real scared of, you know, Trump destroying democracy and the Western world along with it. And we need an example of something different, saying, yes, we survived all that, and here we are, and it's better. That's what we need. And people are going to, you know, go towards that. And younger fans will fall in love with it, just like we did when we were younger. Because the sort of biggest fan base, age group of the fan base is about 40, because they fell in love with Next Generation in the teenage years. Bring out another show like that, and new fans will fall in love with it for the same reasons. So that's what they need to do. Will they do it? If they have their best interests in mind, they will. And that's what I'm hoping. So I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of these rumours, of the possibility of all this being true, and is Star Trek finally saved? Did Section 31, in its just bleak awfulness, actually save Star Trek? I hope, because I'm an optimist. At the end of the day, I hope, and I need that.